Hey?
Yes, yes.
Right
Amazing. I
on.
love it.
Okay, I'll do a 3, 2, 1 and we'll go for it. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to A Hoops Journey, episode 134. 4 years into the podcasting and still going strong. And we have an absolute legend in the Canadian basketball scene, someone we are thrilled to sit down with. As I just joked with her, finally pays off to know Steve Bauer. How do you summarize this person in a nutshell? From Saunders Secondary to Pepperdine, from 2005 to 2018, I believe maybe 1 year off in there representing Team Canada on the U19, 21, and senior level. Pro overseas, a 3-time Olympian, a flag bearer, which is something that we'll get into because it's one thing to be in an Olympics. It's one thing to play for your national team. To be selected as a flag bearer is quite phenomenal. My friend Mark Starkey said to say hello and said she is one of the best spirits that he knows out there, is now the founder of cultivate.co, an organization that encourages and equips individuals to be and the best selves. And that sounds amazing because being a high school teacher, I mean, I think we could go for 4 hours here. Anyways, we have Miranda Ayim today. How are you?
I am so good and so excited to be here with you today. Excited to get
Good.
into it.
Awesome. I fumbled that a bit, and it's for people to be their best selves. Let's get into that right away. Why? Why start something like that? Through all the experience you've had through sport, how did you start to see that as something for yourself that, clearly is something you're passionate about, but also turning it into a business and trying to make others see themselves in a positive light?
hmm Well, sometimes what I like to do is break down the word performance, which is essentially the space that I've been in for the past 20 years, the world of high performance sports. You're constantly trying to better yourself, take it to the next level, whether you're going after a specific goal or you're just trying to be better than you were yesterday. That's
Mhm.
the space that I've been operating in. But nowadays, now that I'm retired, I find that I'm still do the same exact thing, both with myself, but also with the people that I work with. So when
Mhm.
I talk about performance now, I talk a lot about sustainable performance, how we can do that consistently in a way that aligns with our values. And when I talk about performance, I say it's essentially showing up where it matters most. And
Mhm.
all of us have different areas of our life where we just want to show up and we want to show up well, whether that's work, whether it's with our partner, whether it's with our kids, whether it's in this specific hobby or this specific goal. And I'm passionate about breaking down the strategies and habits that are required to do that.
I like to pause when I hear something that's like goosebumps for me. I'm like, being a coach and working with young people, and I teach a leadership class. People who listen to the show will vomit because I mention it all the time, but that is so up my alley. And I think it's so cool that you've taken that. Did you find it hard when you transitioned to retirement to take that intensity of care through body, mind, spirit, diet, all those things, and turn that into a career for yourself? Was it a tough transition to sort of figure what that looked like?
Mhm. In a word, yes. I always try to be as candid as I can when I'm responding to people about that
Hmm.
because as much as you know the transition for anything really, but specifically with sport is hard.
Hmm.
And I was quite prepared for the transition. I knew it was coming. I had planned a couple years out. Um, Olympic athletes, we kind of plan our years in 4 year stints around the
Sure.
Olympics. Do I want to go to the next one? Do I have it in me? And so it's funny. I actually had two jobs lined up before I even finished. I was interviewing for jobs when we were down in Tampa, Florida, in the middle of the pandemic, getting ready to go from there to Japan.
Oh way.
So this didn't come out of left field.
Hmm.
Yet still, it was a really difficult transition
Hmm.
because think about it, you've done something for the past 20 years, trained intensively and focused on that. And regardless of whether your ball is life or not, you still have a large element of your identity that's wrapped up in sports.
Hmm.
And suddenly it's no longer there. That's not what you do anymore. And you're essentially starting over from scratch. And for me, I physically moved from the last 11 years overseas, moved up my house and all my possessions back to Canada to start from scratch. It felt
Hmm.
like obviously there's a lot of transferable skills and things that were applicable. But yes, the transition has been a ride and a half, but I have an incredible support system. So many people who have mentored me and coached me along the way.
Hmm.
And part of the process, like any transition, is just kind of learning and failing as you go along and iterating until you find something that works. And that's, I still do that every day, but I feel like I'm in a place where I'm happy with what I'm doing and excited to see where it leads.
Fantastic. All right. This is going to be great. Let's get into it. Before that 20-year grueling physical span of traveling all over the globe and taking care of your body and trying to work on the left hand and whatever else, take us back to a young you and a little bit about your upbringing and why basketball started to come into your life and how it came into your life.
Mhm. So I'm from London, Ontario. I think you mentioned in the intro, and I love London. It's funny, my older brother, I have an older brother who's about 4 years older, and he always wanted to leave London and go to a big city like New York or Chicago because he loved the Bulls. And I was always pretty content in London, the Forest City. And it's just interesting how life turns out. And my career has taken me all sorts of places, but that's the longer version of that. But I grew up playing all sorts of sports here in London,
Hmm.
played volleyball, ran track, did cross country, played soccer. I come from a very outdoorsy, active family, and so we were always getting out and about and doing things. Spent my summers camping up in Algonquin Park, and got to a point where I always had a height advantage over people. I was 6 feet going into high school, and then grew another couple inches, and
Ooh.
yeah, so that puts things in my favor, I'd say, in a sport like basketball, um, as well as volleyball. So those were my two sports in high school. I continued playing those. And around the age of 13, I went to a tryout and got selected to one of the developmental teams for Canada basketball. And so, pretty much since that point, I've been in the Canada basketball system, developmental system, and eventually to the senior women's team.
Hmm.
And um, yeah, continued to build into those spaces. And towards the end of my career, got an opportunity to go down to get a scholarship down to the States. And
Yeah.
so that took me down to Pepperdine. I don't know if you want me to pause there, but high school was a great experience and got some great opportunities in the sporting space and beyond.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm just intrigued, like someone you talk about that growth spurt. Did that affect you at all, or were you just like a pretty, did you have lots of self-esteem as a younger person and it didn't bother you because you were gifted athletically and you used that as sort of like to build your confidence, or was it like all eyes on me? And I, male or female, sometimes as teachers we're guilty of when a student is taller and looks bigger, you expect them to act older just instantly, right? But it's like, wait, I'm 13 years
Mhm.
old. So, did that affect you a little bit, or was it meh? I'll just kick everyone's butt out here.
You know what? That's a very interesting question. I'm sure has many, many layers to it, especially I'd say, yeah, especially on the woman's side of
Hmm.
things, because it's not always good to be a tall girl. And I'm not saying that because it's my view. It's just like it carries a certain burden. People will look at you. It's a bit more bizarre. There, if you're trying to date, sometimes there's that element as well. So you definitely have to lean in intentionally about building up your own self-worth and what is where is that really grounded? Because it can't be in an external perception, right? But I think sport was definitely a great avenue for me because it felt like there was a purpose to my stature.
Mm,
But also, not that there needs to be a purpose, but I think it was really useful for me to have an outlook and feel like, oh, this is really great. I can leverage this. This is a strength. I can lean into it. And I remember a moment that my dad imparted some wisdom on me. I think I was probably early teens, and he just said, you always need to um, walk with your chin up and your shoulders back. Don't try and hide your
mm,
size. And I think that is important for both men and women, because sometimes when you're a little bit taller, you physically try to become a little bit smaller and compensate.
hmm.
But no, carry your size with grace and confidence.
Yeah, love it. Great answer. I can only imagine what it'd be like to be a part of one of your speaking when you're hosting. I love it. Love the
Yeah.
intentionality in the language you're using. It's right up my alley. Okay, so talk about those high school years and you know getting identified early on, being a part of Canada and that development program. When did you start to realize or think like basketball could lead to an avenue of getting a scholarship and playing at another level? Were there some mentors in your area, or was it Team Ontario that got you elevated to that? And because there's you start to grow and enjoy the sport, and then you realize like, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this. But when does it click to something of, wow, this could be a post-secondary thing plus a pro thing?
Hmm. Yeah. While I can't pinpoint an exact moment that the the switch flicked and I thought, oh, I can do this. It was a bit of a gradual thing, but
Mhm.
I had a great support system around me, but my parents in particular, through that whole recruiting process and making decisions around what's next, they were so key in that
Mhm.
process, and also before that in not forcing me to play a sport, but giving me opportunity and space to choose that of my own
Mhm.
volition. um there was another piece that you mentioned. Oh, Team Ontario. I always love saying this because I actually never made Team
That's what I was wondering.
Ontario.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I tried out multiple times, never made it. And again, whether it's just like roster, sometimes alignment, there's people who fill the spots and others who don't make it. Or I was all
Politics, cough, cough.
politics, always something you have to
Yeah.
manage in athletics. But also, I was very raw. I was
Sure.
like athletic at that age, raw. That's another thing that comes into play with tall athletes. We're a little bit gangly. We're still trying to like figure out how our body is working, and but the patience pays off later on, specifically around university age when you start to see that all come together. And I certainly did as well. And so I never made my provincial team, but I was still playing with our national development team, which I think was a great opportunity to kind of get my name out there, get my face out there, and provided an opportunity to get some film, which was then sent down to the States, which kind of kickstarted that whole recruitment process that eventually got me a scholarship down to Pepperdine University
Hmm.
in California.
Yeah. And that I was going to say is, you're nowhere near as old as I am, but you are a little bit more of a vintage. So what was it like in that era, sort of the recruiting process? Obviously, no social media. And we just interviewed a player, a freshman from UBC, and he talked about how when he was in high school, he enjoyed the social media because it got his name out there, like you just mentioned. So in a different manner. And I never really processed that because, I grew up in the VHS era, right? Like mailing a tape and hopefully someone comes to watch you play. Talk about that process in your era and why Pepperdine, other than location. I've heard amazing things about that campus and place, but what was it about Pepperdine that separated itself for you? Because it seems to me, and I'm going to assume, you seem like a thinker and a processor, and it doesn't seem to me like you were going to make a decision based on who had the best swag, although it was nice. So there, I just asked you 41 questions. Let's see you tackle that.
Yeah, I'll tackle them sequentially. All right, number one. Um, no, you're
She's a
right in
pro. She's
saying
a pro.
you are certainly right in saying that the landscape has certainly changed over the last decade, 15 years. I am of the same vintage of VHS to DVD, of sharing the highlights in that space. And I can't imagine what athletes kind of have to untangle now with the added pressure of social media, but also the benefit of social media.
Hmm.
Specifically on the women in the women's game, social media has been a huge piece of the success and added viewership of fans who follow, because so much of sports is about sports viewership, and sports fandom is about knowing the story of the players and, like, getting behind a certain player, learning the history, and then building a following like that. And
Hmm.
because typical media, it's changing these days, but there's not been historically a space for female athletes in that area. Social media fills that gap, which is really key for continuing development. I'm going through the list of questions, and I think I might have hit 1.5/2, but you kind of pivoted towards Pepperdine and how the recruitment process
Yeah.
brought me there. And you know what? I'll share something that shocks a lot of people when I share it. Is a lot of Olympic athletes have decided early on in their career that this was something that they wanted to do and pursue. Like from the age of 5, they saw the rings and that was their goal.
Sure.
That was not the case for me. I was good at sports. I was tall. I enjoyed it. And I saw some opportunities to go to school and get an education for free.
Hmm.
And I'm a big nerd. First of all, school in our household always came first.
Okay.
And that was one of the reasons why I selected Pepperdine of the schools that were kind of on my short list, because it does have a good academic background. It also is like a private Christian school. It's a small size, small class sizes. The coach as well. Um, I I believed in her vision, like just the values of the team and the school, like everything attracted me to that. So it wasn't just sports.
Hmm.
It was a holistic package where I thought that I could make a difference. I thought that I could play. I thought that I could get a good education, and I would be fueled as a person as well. And so that's what swayed my decision towards Pepperdine and the sandy beaches of Malibu, California.
And upon reflection, how do you feel about that decision?
I still feel great about that
Yeah.
decision, which is wonderful. I
Hmm.
know there's different routes to take when you're considering, and maybe there's some athletes who are listening. Um, Sometimes there's temptation to go to the big school or the big name, which I think is important as far as strategically thinking about, okay, building your career and getting your name out there and all the rest. Although with what we just mentioned with social media, that's kind of maybe equalizing the field a little bit. Same with the transfer portal that's now in
Oh,
the NCAA. A lot of
but
movement. Um, but it's also important to fuel like those things that you actually value. What are you okay with doing and what do you find important?
hmm.
And so that's why I can look back at Pepperdine and throughout my career, feeling that in general, I made decisions that I felt like aligned with my values. And I think that is why I was able to have a long career.
Hmm. When you look back and then think about this, what college athletics looks like now, you just reflected on, someone who made choices academically first, which I think
Mhm.
is invaluable because at the end of the day, hoops comes to an end for all of us, no matter where we and what level. Um,
Mhm.
are you at the like old head is what they would say, where you're like grumpy and they should be getting paid and it's chaos? Like, where are you with all that? And what are your thoughts on how everything is? I'm not opposed to it personally, and this isn't my show, it's yours, but I think it just needs a little bit more structure. It seems a little bit chaotic right now. So I don't just pause and just want to know some of your experience and you've been behind the scenes, you've been on talking hoops on TSN and whatever else. So what are your thoughts with that stuff?
It is a bit of the Wild West right now, as all things are when they just start and they're figuring out some kinks and regulations and all the rest. And obviously, there's also the Canada American um,
Yeah,
issue around that. Like Canadians
exact.
can't take full advantage
Yeah.
of that, which is unfortunate. Um, I'm of two minds, and this is how I exist most days, just in this gray space in the middle. Um, I can see the detriment of programs like NIL and the transfer portal because there's a lot of movement, there's less continuity of teams, there's less loyalty, and it's hard to make things last and make things really concrete if you have a lot of moving parts. That's just a function of a team and best practices, as we know. But at the other hand, there is this space of these schools are making big bucks off of these athletes, and there should be an opportunity for those athletes to also participate in their image and likeness and the gains that are made off of that. And again, I'll speak to the women's side because that's the space that I've been in.
Yeah.
Specifically for women as we build out our career, what's really important nowadays specifically is the branding component of athletes. We know there's a pay gap between male basketball players and women's basketball players, and where we can close that gap a little bit is in the sponsorship and partnership realm. And that's why NIL and building up that brand at a university level and going into the pro space is really valuable. So then you can actually get some increased earnings. So that's something, a resource that we'll think will be really important for female athletes as they come through. So interested to see how that develops over the next several years.
For sure. That was a good Switzerland answer. You kept everybody happy there. It's good. Nicely done. But it's true. Yeah, and you see like, Angel Reese is doing things as soon as her career is done with, at the university level. Caitlin Clark just signed with Nike and those things. Yeah, I think it's great. And I think that is one of the benefits with social media and stuff is getting to know these people on a more personal level, but like you say, they're brands, right? And how do you feel about the state of women's hoops? Obviously, there's been lots of great progression, and I'm sure at times you think it's probably a little bit too late, way too late. But you are someone who your landscape is like you saw a pretty steep incline of it all, right? Through your experiences. What are some things you'd like to continue to see progress and grow and develop within the women's game?
Mhm. Yeah, I've absolutely loved watching the growth of women's sports, specifically in Canada and in North America more widely. Watching just the viewership of March Madness and hearing people talk about that just out and about, and people asking me about that was never the case
Hmm.
before. And so that's super exciting and super exciting for the next generation coming up. And I've seen the progression over the length of my career because when I started with a senior women's national team, we were maybe 20th,
Hmm.
24th in the world. And when I finished, we were fourth in the world. And that's a big jump over a fairly short time, right?
Yeah.
And so regular medal contenders going to the Olympics every 4 years. Sometimes we take that for granted, I think, nowadays. Um, but it's a huge progression. What I think is the next step for women's basketball, specifically in Canada, because Canada is one of the only, if not the only, developed democratic countries in the world that does not have a women's professional league
Mm.
in basketball, which is a bit embarrassing for Canada when we tout that we espouse these values,
Hmm.
especially since I played in Turkey for 3 years, was paid very well for playing and you know showing up in this space that I've traded in. And sometimes we look down on other countries, but they're putting their money where their mouth is. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I think the next step is to have a domestic league in Canada. I recognize that that takes work. It takes someone to spearhead it, multiple people to get behind it. But I've seen it done again and again and again. It's a little bit more around a cultural shift than anything else, because there's money everywhere.
Hmm.
And it's just kind of putting all of the dots together. But these are conversations that are being had, will continue to be had, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
When you say cultural shift, like expand a little bit more on that. What do you mean by that?
To share, like, maybe a usually when I say we need a domestic league in Canada, people are like, yes, but it's really difficult, and there's it doesn't make sense business wise or like financially, and it's kind of a bit of a humming and hawing, which I understand. I'm not a
Hmm.
person that's like advocate to the nth degree without understanding the realities of business. No,
Sure.
everybody needs to understand that. But because my career has led me all around the world, I know that it's possible. And
Sure.
I know that I played for the past 6 years of my career in sold out gyms, and people honored and loved their female athletes.
Hmm.
That's not currently the case in Canada. Um, and I think it can be. So that's why I hold the space for the possibility. And I hope it happens in my lifetime.
We've got people grinding it out with the CEBL, right? Like
Yep.
it's happening. So I just wanted you to clarify what your definition of cultural shift. So just the language
Yeah.
and the approach and the overall thinking of, instead of half empty, it's half full, and looking for possibilities and finding the avenues and the money and searching it out. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Love it.
And also for the
Hmm.
people who are like logistically minded, I also it's not just starting a league out of nothing. I think it's also important. Like, we have a brain drain of athletes. Like, I went to school in the States, so we lose our athletes from a very young age. So that starts from
Sure.
the ground up, structural changes as well. And the interesting part around that is, I think a country that pours into sports, whether it's basketball or otherwise, um, is a stronger one because it's a healthier one. They've shown again and again the link between sport and just vital life skills, confidence, especially for women, mental fitness, the lessons that we learn in sport, sacrifice. There's so many beautiful lessons that we take from sport. And it's interesting that this part of a recent push and focus areas for the Canadian Olympic Committee, leveraging sport as a public policy tool. And I think
Mm.
that's a really interesting space that we can exist in, and see where it leads.
You have any interest in politics? Talk to him, man. This is church on a
Oh
Wednesday, people.
goodness.
Church on a Wednesday. He's going to town. I love it. Let's
I don't know if I'm
go.
thick-skinned enough to be in
Yeah, yeah.
politics, or have the general fortitude for that, but I do love to support great causes, and yeah, so we'll see where. Yeah, excited for the future of Canada, excited for the future of Canadian athletes.
Love it. Let's circle back to Pepperdine there. What were the things that stood out when you first, from London to there, those first few practices? What changed in the level of hoops for you? What was eye-opening, and when did you feel like, okay, I can do this? Like I mean, obviously you got recruited there and you're on a scholarship, but there are some factors transitioning there, getting used to the lifestyle, living on your own, all that stuff. So, um, talk about those first few weeks on campus and figuring it out.
Oh goodness, it's quite a shift. Obviously, as a freshman, you're meeting all these new people, and it's so fun and exciting. Frosh Week across the nation or North America is always fun. But I'd say the transition from high school basketball to university basketball was quite marked. It was a bit
Mm.
of baptism by fire, like going in, learning, you're drinking from a fire hose. My basketball IQ expanded dramatically during my time there. I think it was very formative for me. I attribute
Mhm.
a lot of my success to that time. and I learned a lot about myself. NCAA is known; it's a great league, and a high level of competition. But the things I remember most is just some of those getting up at 6 a.m. for a pre-season workout of sprints on the track or sprints on the baseline, and learning that you can indeed do one more sprint, or you can indeed surpass the limit that you had in your mind. And those are some of the things that stand out and stay with me still to this day. And then also that idea of teamwork and learning to sacrifice yourself for a greater good, which then echoed into what I eventually did with our national team. But that's something that's really energizing, and I really enjoyed about my college career.
And going from probably, being a pretty dominant player to, just the fish in the fishbowl with everybody else, and working through all that and finding your role within the team. And what did you shift from going to being a high school student to a university student? Was it more routine? Did you start to take care of yourself better? Like, what were the things that you did to continue to elevate yourself, basketball wise?
Yeah, well, a lot of our schedule was dictated by practice class. So there's not a lot in travel. There's not a lot of wiggle room. I'm thankful that our coach put a lot of emphasis on study hall and expectations. And obviously, there's a certain GPA that you need to hit in order to be eligible to play. That was certainly not my GPA goal. It was quite a bit higher than that.
Did you graduate on
And
time and everything?
from university?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you were on track.
On track. School has never really been an issue for me. It's an area that I thrived in and enjoyed. I enjoy being a nerd. And
sounds like you understood the bigger picture too, though, is like, I identify myself as a hooper, but I also want to expand my mind and know that there are business opportunities or work opportunities that I want to have, and a degree is going to be something that elevates me towards that. Seems like you had that pretty early on.
Yeah, exactly. Because at the end of the day, the life of an athlete is finite. You never know when you're going to get injured. You never know when you're no longer making the cut. And so you do need to have a plan B, or at least a set of tools and transferable skills that are necessary for that, right?
For sure. And during those years, when did you start to think, obviously Canada's a part of that process, but professionally, when did you think, all right, I need an agent and I can expand here? And who are the people you're leaning on, still in a pretty young generation in terms of, like we say, like figuring out how to get overseas? Are there some mentors? Are there people within Canada? Is it people at Pepperdine that you're helping you to figure out the next step for you?
So I was grateful to have a coach who had a link to a professional agent. I think that's typically the core chain of events. So I was introduced to my agent through my head coach, and she got me a job overseas. And to be honest, at that point, I was still in the space of like, okay, like I'll do this for a year and, enjoy the Euro life and then get the experience, and then I'll come back and work. Although that time, as I know, 11 years later, at that time as well, though, I had been playing with the developmental teams, and up to, I think it might have been under 21 team, as it was called at that point. And I was on the cusp of making the team. And so I said, okay, what would look real good on the resume is Olympian. So maybe I should continue to explore this avenue. And in order to do that, you need to continue to go overseas and develop your craft. And so that's why I went overseas. And that summer in between graduation and going overseas, made the team for my first time, and never looked back and continued to play. And then also with our national team in the summers.
Hmm. I don't know which way to go, but two things. One, talk about life as a pro. Obviously much different than college structure. You have class, people are hovering over you, making sure things are getting done, mandatory lifts, all that stuff. To
Mhm.
very independent, different language, brand new city, places, teammates who might not even speak English with you, like kind of all over the
Mhm.
place. Um, and I love the fact that now for both the men and women, it's just a common thing. Like it's not just WNBA, NBA. It's like you can go and have a great living and see the world and play hoops. And I think that's
Mhm.
a fantastic thing. So talk about that transition. And then the second part would just be that moment that you got, I see it over your shoulder, the frame jersey that you got
Mhm.
to wear the maple leaf for the first time and talk about how special that was and what went through your brain as you were getting your
Mhm.
jersey on that day.
Yeah. So
41
it's
questions
yeah,
with
another
Aaron
list,
Mitchell.
and we'll go through it. We'll go through it. No, so my first experience overseas was in Turkey. It was in a small town called Alanya, right on the southern coast, so right on the Mediterranean Sea. Great coastal city. Um, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people didn't speak English. Some of my teammates did. My coach certainly did not. The assistant coach kind of acted as a translator. He could speak decent English, but it was a very interesting experience. Definitely the love in basketball scene comes to mind there. Um, and so that was a bit of a cultural shift for sure, just going there, being in a different room. Like everything is different, architecture is different, breakfast is different. I love the Turkish breakfast, by the way. Their food
Why?
is
What's
excellent.
what's so good about it?
Okay, let me tell you, Aaron, the first time that I tasted the breakfast, it's mainly, there's a lot of different egg dishes, great bread, and a few different bread and pastry dishes that are excellent. But my favorite part is they have this fresh feta, they have fresh tomatoes, fresh cucumbers, and then all the extra stuff that you add with it. Um, but I had never tasted a cucumber like that. I didn't know cucumbers could be so flavorful, so
Mm.
fresh. It's the difference, I guess, when you're having something straight from the garden as opposed to something that's been sitting on a truck for
Sure.
months. Um, and so I just remember the first moment, I was like, this is amazing. And so even till this day, like literally this morning, I had poached eggs, feta, cucumbers, tomatoes, some sprouts. It's still my favorite type of breakfast.
There you go. Okay. All right. Well, that
Yeah.
answers that. All right.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, it was an incredible experience. Was really fortunate to get a few spots in Turkey. So that first year I was in the south, second year I was in Istanbul, which is an incredible, just metropolis of a city. There's like 8 million people in and
Mm.
around Istanbul. And then my last year was in Ordu, right up on the Black Sea, so in the northern part of Turkey. So really enjoyed just leaning into the historical side of Turkey and their legacy and their history and their culture. So that's the other side of sport. You get to travel and meet new people and expand your worldview. And then the subsequent 8 years of my career were spent in France. First 2 years were in Toulouse, which is south central France, and then last 6 years were in a small city called Mont-de-Marsan, which is like an hour 15 from Bordeaux, so southwest
Hmm.
France.
And how do you go
So
about that approach of like knowing that that international European pro thing, like it's really year to year? Like, how does an athlete deal with that side of it, knowing that there is pressure to perform, but even if you do perform, it could look different city, different jersey. Do you kind of
yeah.
just do you just take it as it goes like that? Because I always found that to be interesting, where it's like not the typical like sign a 5-year deal, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. It is really unique. And overseas is a very particular lifestyle. I know some great ballers who just were not about the overseas life for all the reasons
Hmm.
that you shared, switching from team to team, or just like culturally weren't maybe very comfortable, would prefer to be back in I almost said the States because it's a lot of Americans who are like a little bit
Sure.
more comfortable just to be in the
Hmm.
States. Um, uh, Not to spread stereotypes, but that's the one that is one part of the experience of it can be uncomfortable sometimes. You don't
Yeah,
have all your creature comforts. You're going to be left out of a lot of conversations just because you don't speak the language. That's why I had to learn French when I was there, because I wanted to socialize with people. And yeah, and then the bouncing around from team to team. You just got to know that is the norm. You
hmm,
quickly learn to depersonalize things because it is a business.
yeah.
And even if you played well, they might be looking for someone else. And it's difficult to take away that personal side, but also realize, okay, I'm also a business now too. So what am I needing, and how can I position myself? And how do I also protect myself?
Hmm.
Because not all teams are created equal, and some will take advantage if you don't have the right things set in place. That's one
Sure.
reason I stayed in France as long as I did, because they have a very firm and structural system and league, all legal, all great. Um, and
You beat me to it. I was going to ask you if you had like a crazy story because you hear like, I had buddies in Greece and, they're on, making 150, they get half, and then all of a sudden the owner's gone and the team's folded. And they're like, well, what about the rest of the money? Nope, sorry, you're on your own now. Like, what? They just
yeah, exactly.
things that you never
Yeah.
thought you'd have to think about, right? You just assume, oh, I'm going to go play pro. I've got a contract. Things are good. It's like, actually, no, I have to really think about what the league is, what's the reputation, talk to people, find out and figure it all out, which obviously, that's why you hire an agent too. But it's just
Mhm.
it's an interesting to process, right? Yeah.
It really is. A good agent is really useful. Insider information, people who are on the team, you know that a little bit more once you've been over there. So you have
Hmm.
a better sense of the good teams and the teams that regularly don't pay their players.
Yeah.
So some people are tempted, and that's how those teams get people every year, because they get a big contract, but the contract is not fulfilled. Whereas in France, it's tied to their legal companies that are taxed by the state. And so they have to pay their employees. We are employees, not just contracted individuals.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but in the same token, in France, the contracts are lower for the exact reason.
Okay.
So it's a trade off. It depends on, do you
Sure.
want security and stability, or do you want a little risk reward
Yeah.
um, deal?
It's like the
Mhm.
mortgage. Yeah. Do you want to freeze your
Yes,
mortgage or yeah, leave it open? Yeah. Um,
that's it.
just quickly, because we've had a couple other female guests who talked about kind of after going through, like Kayla Alexander, for example, just talking about how after being overseas, she had this WNBA thing in her mind, but then realized that her lifestyle and what she wanted and what was important for her, Europe offered that so much more for her, and that um, maybe the WNBA wasn't what it is today, and still a lot of people choosing to play in Europe. Now I know you were there for a little cup of coffee with Miss Swoops, but what was that like? Was it WNBA for you, or was it I want best case scenario for myself and I trust
Mhm.
myself that I'll make the right choice?
Yeah, you know what, Aaron, you phrase that so beautifully, because a lot of people don't understand some of the complexities that go behind that decision.
Hmm.
And so I did have an opportunity to go down to the WNBA after my first year overseas, down when back when Tulsa Shock still had a team down there. And so I was able to see the league. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot about myself and the league there. But also the other element is, then more so than now, um, there are some conflicting timelines when it comes to the WNBA and playing for Canada basketball, for example. They're both in the summer. People don't often realize that our national team players who play in the WNBA are fined to come and play
Oh,
for Canada because they're missing pro
wow.
games. If it's not an Olympic year, there's an Olympic pause,
Sure.
but for other years. And so those are decisions there. But I'll echo what Kayla said as well. My ultimate goal was to play for Team Canada, the
Mm,
Olympic team. That was my why, that was my motivator. And I would prefer to fully show up for that than to split my energies in a league that, while great, didn't fit my goals personally as a player. I felt fully satisfied by playing for Team Canada and playing for one of the best leagues in the world in France, um, which is essentially just the WNBA in France. Again, the
yeah.
WNBA is a premier league. They have some of the best players in the world. I just say that to say sometimes people think the WNBA is the only professional option that we have, but there's a lot
Mhm.
of great options. Yeah.
Yeah. And you get the right city and fans, and it's like,
Oh
it could be
goodness.
wild, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said show up a lot. Are you a Brene Browner at all? Do you follow her? Do you read any of her?
Mm.
Yeah, because she's always talking about showing up. So I just was curious about if you've studied her at all, because I find her fantastic. So
Yeah, I didn't think about that link with that verbiage, but yeah,
mhm.
I do enjoy her, especially I haven't read a lot of her recently, but when she first came on the scene, I'm trying to remember the first book that I ever read of her. I think it was the one that was really focusing on vulnerability
Yeah,
and just how that's a strength and how we leverage that in how we show up.
yeah,
But yeah, I do really appreciate her work.
love it. Okay, so you've touched on a bunch of times the Olympics, the Olympic team being the ultimate goal. Let's talk about that conversation when you finally make the roster and you know that you're going to have a chance to play for a team that could possibly qualify for the Olympics, and then you do. How amazing is that?
Oh, just incredible.
Mm,
To put that Canada on your chest is a feeling like nothing else in the world. And one of the best memories, people often ask, "Oh, what was your favorite memory from when you played?" And mine to this day, there's many for sure, but
yeah.
one of them that stands out was our first qualification for the Olympics, the London 2012 Olympics in 2012 was the qualification because it was at a last chance tournament at the very last moment, the last game, the last possible moment we could have qualified. And it was all these years of pent up energy, laying the groundwork with a program that hadn't qualified for, we had missed the last few Olympics before that. That was by far and away one of the most incredible experiences of my life for sure.
Probably just the combination of being ecstatic, but also the sigh of just, we finally, we did it, right? But then also
Mhm.
not having much time to gather yourself and be like, we got a tournament to go play in, like what a
Yeah.
crazy, unique experience. And then have you given yourself the time to truly reflect yet and think 3 times plus like a flag bearer? Like that's pretty elite stuff. And I think it says a lot about you as a person and what you stand for. You can tell just by how you speak and just getting to know you here in the last hour or so, who you are. They don't just tap anybody on the shoulder, right? They want someone to represent their country and that flag who is, you know, I don't even know how to put it into words. What's that
Mm.
feeling like leading an entire nation out? And I'm sure you've answered this a bunch of times. I don't care. I want to hear it from you myself because
Yeah.
I can only imagine. And I must say, getting to know you, chatting with Mark offline about you saying I was going to chat with you today. I think they made the right choice. And I think you're someone who's fantastic for women and basketball players in our country. And you've literally lit the torch. So I'll let you speak now.
Yeah, no, it's again, when you think about those moments that stand out in your career, that's certainly one of them. I've had years of bearing a different type of flag on my jersey in the world of basketball. But that was different in the sense that I was leading the entire Team Canada, the best that our nation had to offer, plus all the people watching and supporting back home, alongside my wonderful co-flag bearer, Nate Hirayama of the Rugby Sevens. Like that was such an incredible moment and extremely humbling
Mm,
because I've said this before and I'll say it again. Sports, we don't exist in a vacuum as athletes. We are here because of the culmination of love, support, energy, mentoring of all the people who have poured into us. So that moment for me was not about me at all. It was everybody who had a piece of that journey, as well as all the people who were just passionate to be supporting Canada in that moment. And I'll tell you, walking out into the stadium after waiting in the tunnels for like 3 hours, as is the process. I think one of my first thoughts was just I thought of my parents watching that moment and was just really humbled and was just hoping that they were proud in that moment. And that's one of the things that stands out. But yeah, talk about ending the career with a cherry on top. That certainly was.
have you thought about too how many young girls were watching that maybe were somewhat interested in basketball, knew that the team had qualified for the Olympics, but when someone is elevated to being the flag bearer and they're going like, wow, maybe that's something I can shoot for one day, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, that's the importance of visibility, just being able to give face or a voice to possibility
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Oh, I could do that.
Jeez, I'm going to subscribe to the newsletter. This is too good. Let's do some fun questions and then you can be done with me for
Mhm.
the day. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Really appreciating the conversation. It's great stuff. Do you have a hidden talent that nobody knows about, or maybe a few people know about?
The first one that comes to mind is I am not going to do it here today because it will blow out your speakers. I can make a pretty good like pterodactyl call. Like
What? I thought you were going to say like singing or rapping or something. What? What?
it's exactly what you're
Okay.
imagining. It's like a high, like a screech kind of, but it sounds like a. I'm certain you have
How,
not had a response like that in the
how
podcast.
does how does someone come to realizing that that's one of their talents? Like, of
I
all the
don't
things
know,
you
you
can
know.
do, like, oh my
Playing
God,
around, fooling around with my brother growing up, like
that
just
is
being a
not
weirdo.
what I was expecting to come up. That was like Kim Smith. We like, what's your favorite chips? And she says, well, I like oranges. And we're like, what? Like,
That is not the question, Kim.
I'm not gonna do it now because I might blow your speakers. I thought for sure it was gonna be like a pterodactyl call. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Note.
Wow, good to know. Good to know. You get the chance. The artist can be dead or alive. Maybe you've seen them or not. Not sure what kind of music you're into, but is there someone you'd like to see or see again in concert? If you have a couple, that's fine. Yeah. Is there somebody out there?
I have so many.
Oh, let's
Uh,
go.
I listen to a lot of different genres, all the genres, non-discriminatory. I would have loved to see Michael Jackson in concert
Oh,
because I heard it was just an experience. I like a lot of funk music, but most of what I listen to on a day-to-day basis is pretty chill,
okay.
like indie, atmospheric folk kind of vibe.
Oh, okay.
Um, and there was an artist who recently came to Toronto. His name is Harrison Storm. I quite liked his
Okay.
last album. I think it was called Wonder, Why Don't You?
Okay.
I wish it would have aligned schedule wise. So I would have liked to see him. Maybe Ben Howard or someone like that, or Nova
Hmm.
Moore. They're super kind of like more sit down, chill
Hmm.
concerts, but I like live music in whatever form.
Me too. I was going to say, like, I get blown away by people playing instruments and doing musical things. I think it's one of the most fantastic things. And it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter what genre. It's still kind of mind blowing that people are able to do that on that stage, literally is. And I
Yeah.
agree. A nice smaller venue with like some good sound, forget about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's not Turkish breakfast, you get the opportunity to snack a little bit and have some chips. Is there something that catches your eye when you walk through the store if you're going to have a bag of chips? Or
I
do you?
just had some that were like apple cider vinegar chips, which I
Ooh.
guess is just a bougie version of salt and vinegar chips. But I like the ones that are like crafted from real potatoes, but they just have a little bit more crunch. I
Crunch?
like
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
type. Mhm.
You like the tangy?
I do like the
Or
tangy. I'll also take like sour cream,
yeah.
and then they add like another random ingredient.
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
kind of vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm down.
Mm.
Books or movies?
Oh, I'm currently reading a really good book.
Okay.
I think it's called Fall of Giants
Okay.
by Ken Follett, who some people might know from his Pillars of Earth book. And I think it's a trilogy or a series. His books are always like 1,500 pages, and he's a masterful writer. And so The Fall of Giants is about in and around World War One, but written from a completely different perspective of the lives of the people who are kind of experiencing it, the lives of some diplomats. And it's not a typical war book because that's not my genre, but
Gotcha.
this is really interesting.
Now, are you like a pick it up throughout the day? Is it before bed? Is there a time, or is it just whenever you have time, you'll do it? And how long is it taking you? 1,500 pages. That's like 6 months for me.
I'm a fast reader and
Oh,
I
okay.
am devouring this, so it won't take me very long. I started a few days ago and I'm probably 3/4 of the way
Damn.
through now. And this is probably bad because there's some work that I need to get done and I'm reading it a little bit more than I should.
So that's
But
what you're
typically,
doing when it took you like 3 weeks to book with me. Okay, I see you're
there
reading.
we
All
go.
right.
Yes,
I
I
thought you
was
had things to
reading
get done.
Lost
Yeah.
in the book. Yeah,
Are
but
you an
typically
e-reader?
before bed.
E-reader
I
or hard copy? Are you like I like to look at my shelf or nah?
I prefer shelf hard copy.
Yeah.
I sometimes by force of traveling and stuff, I'm forced onto the my iPad is where I sometimes read.
Yeah. Got you. I just had
Mhm.
to it happened. I just had to get reading glasses. Really small prescription, but I have a 7-year-old, so it was getting to the point like I couldn't read to him at night before bed because like with the dark light, and I was like, oh no. But they actually do
Yes.
make a pretty good difference. And I found since I've had them, I'm actually reading more. So
Oh, nice.
maybe I just was like subconsciously because my wife loves to read before bed. And I'm
Yeah.
like, whatever, I'll just snooze. But then I'm like, now I'm finding myself, I'm deep into the Rex Chapman book right now. If you know
Oh,
Rex Chapman,
fun.
yeah, it's really good
Yeah.
actually. He's very really
Okay.
exposes his life. He has a tough go. He like gets hooked on opiates and
Wow.
found himself he's stealing from an Apple store. Yeah, like
Oh,
and yeah, it's a
goodness.
pretty interesting story. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, you've touched on a few people, but who have been some of the most important people in your life up to this point?
There's too many to name, and certainly my go-to is my parents because they are the sole reason why I am here, both literally and because of what they've poured into me over the years. Both
Hmm.
me and my brother, my biggest supporters. So my brother would make the list as well, and then yeah, all my teammates are a big reason why I'm here as well. I feel so fortunate to have gone to work with the most incredible players day in day out. I think that's really cool.
When you were on those national teams, was there a conversation around what was happening with you and that you were kind of like you were putting the women's scene on the map here in our country, right? Or was it
Mm.
were you aware of that as a group? Was it talked about? or was it just
Mm.
show up and work and, see what happens with it? Or, do you get
Yeah.
what I'm saying with that? Yeah,
Yeah, I think a lot of those conversations come in retrospect.
sure.
Although like when in those big moments you do recognize that they are significant, but maybe you don't feel the impact until later. I
Hmm.
think we just continue to show up and put in the work because we love what we do.
Love it. It's good.
Mm.
And Steve, he made a really good point in our episode. He talked about how the last time, they just, we went from qualifying and being like, all right, to wow, we didn't medal or we didn't make, a semifinal. And that's the standard now, which I think is so great. And he talked about
Mhm.
how being stuck in the bubble and COVID and you couldn't fly home right away, and just some conversations came from that. So I think it's great that the standard is it's getting a medal, which is great. Um,
Mhm.
sorry, I rambled there.
No.
Okay, a few more. Okay, so this is let's go with prime you. So you're in your prime. It's you're feeling your best as an athlete, and you got four others. And you gotta run. So you're going to the outdoor court though. So it's call your own,
Ooh.
15, 21, whatever it is, and you can't lose because you might not get back on the court. There's that many people waiting. So
Yeah.
which four are you taking it? And you can take it any way you want. Your all-time faves, could be teammates, could be anyone. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So are these Canadian players or any
It's your
players?
world. We're just living in it.
Oh goodness, goodness gracious. I was just chatting, I had someone ask me this recently around my Canadian top five. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, first of all of these are my teammates. How can I choose between my teammates?
Hmm.
And I love bringing my old heads, but this is outdoors, so there's a bit of a different vibe. So I need to bring people with some killer instinct. And one of the first people that comes to mind is my Marie Langlois, my point guard for many, many years. She's a baller shot caller. Um, oh, good. This is tough. Kim, who interestingly enough, she's so like precise with what she does, but she's a very high basketball IQ that transfers well
Mm,
in that outdoor space. That's a
okay.
little bit more 3x3 vibe. So I would
Love how
enjoy
you're
her.
breaking
She's
this
great.
down. Love how you're
Yeah,
breaking this
this is
down.
more detailed
Yes.
than you maybe
Nope,
anticipated, but here
nope.
we
I should
are.
not be surprised. I should not be surprised. This is great. Okay, two more.
Um, okay, I'll bring in a couple of there's so many Canadians, but I'm going to bring in a couple of my favorite Euro players.
Yeah.
So either Alba Torrens, who is a Spanish guard who just in her prime just could knock the lights out, unconscious. Um,
That just sounds like a bucket. Albert
it
Torrens
is,
for three. It just sounds
yeah,
like buckets.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It is a walking bucket. Similar style as Marina Johannes, who's a French player, also played in the WNBA for the New York for quite a while. But those are simultaneously. I need a post. Um, Kayla's been killing it lately, so I'll choose her.
What a
Or Kat, because she has a 3x3 going on right now, and she's been balling in the post, and they're gonna make a great scene at Paris 2024 too.
how cool is
So I
that
gave
3-on-3
you,
stuff?
yeah, no,
So great,
it's
hey?
super fun. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna be. I think people are gonna really enjoy it when they tune in.
Yeah. That's okay. You could bring yourself off the bench with that team, and be player
Yeah,
coach. Yeah, yeah.
perfect.
Okay, two more. Do you have a favorite cereal?
I don't eat a lot of cereal because I'm eating my Turkish breakfast. But my favorite cereal growing up was certainly Fruit Loops.
Yes, it was. Just
Hmm.
follow my nose. And then you got to drink the milk
Yes,
after, right? And just get
of
all the
course.
sugar. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Well, listen, this has been so good. And again, appreciate your time. One thing we like to do is put people on the spot. So don't name anyone who you don't think. And if you don't have anyone to recommend yet, that's okay. You can message me later. But who's out there
Hmm.
on a hoops journey? Because I feel like I love this question because it's led to so many people that I would have never thought about or been able to connect to. And like books, podcasts are about storytelling, and we can learn so much. So who's out there that you think would be willing to chop it up with me and has a good story on a hoops journey?
Hmm. You know what? There's a few that come to mind, and maybe we can
Yeah.
chat about this later. I just gave this recommendation recently, so I'm going to give it again,
Okay.
especially if you're interested in getting into a little bit more of the technical side
Mm,
of basketball and where it might be headed, and learning a little bit more about the overseas space and the domestic space. So
mhm.
it was my former point guard before Maya Marie is Shona Thorburn. I don't know if you've
Okay.
already had her on. I don't
Nope.
think so. Um, and fun addition to that, I played with her. She was my point guard. I played with her in France as well as my point guard, and I also finished up my career playing under her as she was the assistant coach at my pro
No
team
way.
when I finished off. Yeah, yeah. So
That's
full circle.
unreal. That's so
Yeah,
unique.
yeah.
That's so, so cool. Yeah, you
Yeah,
have to
lots
mention
of
something
fun.
like that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it's been great to connect. Can love and appreciate everything that you stand for and who you are. An outstanding human being. Is there any last thoughts or reflections before we let you go? From behalf of the podcast, continued success for you and whatever that looks like. Keep being who you are and make an impact on the world, and especially the young women who need those mentors as well. You speak with such power and dignity, and it's been fantastic getting to know you a little bit better today.
Oh, thank you so much for those kind words. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you reaching out, and just want to take a moment to highlight you and the work that you do because I
Mm,
think it's really important. I love the time and energy and passion that you've given to this podcast and highlighting Canadian athletes, Canadian hoopers.
mhm.
We really appreciate it, and I think that's an important part of that. And beyond that, what you do on a daily basis. My mom is a retired teacher,
Oh, nice.
and I know the important role of teachers in our community and society. So thanks for everything that you do as well.